Welcome to Spinning Back Clique, Back Clique, where each week here at MMA Junkie, we take a spin through the biggest stories in MMA. And on today's episode, we got 6 new millionaires courtesy of the PFL. How about that? We got 6 new champions courtesy of the PFL. How about that? And we got 6 days until our final pay-per-view, courtesy of the UFC 5. Actually, I wrote it last night. I wanted to go 666, but All right. Hello, everyone. Gorgeous George here on the con. Look at the distinguished panel we have for you today. It goes from MMA Junkie Radio. He's back here in Las Vegas, the real fight capital of the world. Matt Wells checks in from the editorial side of MMA Junkie. He joins us from Dallas. And finally, the MMA media titan, Mike Bond, rounds out the squad. Can I talk? He checks in from Toronto. Cold coffees on the ones and twos. Let's get going, guys. The PFL just had their Super Bowl, if you will. It was the culmination of the regular season and playoffs. And as mentioned, 6 belts and 6 M's were handed out on Friday morning or afternoon. 4 of those belts are headed back to Russia, by the way. Thoughts on the event overall, and then we'll zero in on the fighters. Let's start off with Matt Wells. We haven't seen him in a while. Go.
Yeah, man. I was actually very pleased with this event and how it came off. You look back at recent PFL events, especially recent PFL Championship events, going into them, you're kind of dreading how long these things can go because they put so many championship fights scheduled for 25 minutes on there. You're like, man, we could be here for hours and hours and hours. And this event was long, don't get me wrong, but when it got to the main card, it really started cooking. Like there was really like no pacing issues. It seemed like after the fights were done, they were already right into the next one. They didn't play lengthy video packages or anything like that, except for I think one time before like the Dakota Ditcheva fight, or maybe it was after that one. But when there's so many finishes like you had on that main card, obviously like the only one that wasn't a finish was the main event. They did a good job with the pacing overall. So I think that was the biggest thing for me going into the event. And then, of course, as it played out, like I said, we got so many good finishes, so many highlight moments for these guys in their biggest moments of their careers, for a lot of them winning $1 million. So there was a lot to like on this card. Even way on the early prelims, there were some highlight moments. So overall, I give this a very solid grade. I would say it's an A if I had to put a letter grade to it for the PFL in this spot.
Wow. Okay. So you actually thought they tightened up the time in between fights and all that? Because I did keep track of a few, but it has been so bad in the past that they did improve, but I still feel like some more tightening can be done. Like the first fight, I think took about 20 to 25 minutes just to get going.
Yeah. I mean, just considering how it felt based on like the older events, like it just felt smoother. Yeah. Right. It wasn't perfect by any means. You're correct. But I'm basing this, like I'm grading on a PFL curve. So
yes. Yeah. All right. Mike Bond, how about you, man? What were your thoughts? You've seen a lot of these major events for different organizations. This was a big one for them. First year with some Bellator talent. What were your thoughts?
Mm-hmm. I don't know how you could say it was anything other than a success, honestly. I was just looking through like the results of all the PFL championship events that they've done to date, and this had the most finishes in the title fights. So that's like a huge feather in their cap. Like Matt said, the pacing went pretty good. There was highlights. It all kind of came together. Like I stayed up or got up for this entire 16 fight card in which there was 10 5-round title fights scheduled. And by the end of it, it didn't feel like it was exhausting or it was a chore to get through, which has felt that way many times covering or watching PFL and Bellator shows. So yeah, this was, I think, about as good as they could have asked for. How they capitalize on it, I mean, you have all these Russian winners, right? Like they're not necessarily the type to go out there and be boasting about the PFL brand and going to be doing all this media about how great the tournament format was and how life-changing this money is. So that's like kind of one of my concerns. And I guess we'll get to that later as we talk about big picture PFL. But this whole night or day, whatever you want to call it, or whatever time zone you were in, I thought was pretty much a home run for them. So they should be pretty happy. I think this was a great way to cap off their year after what's been a pretty big struggle of 2024 with them, with a lot of growing pains involved.
Good stuff, Mike. And I feel your pain, man. Sometimes when Dan Hardy's in there with them, just it loses some of the steam off a beautiful finish. Some of them don't speak English, or their English is rough. You got Goldsoft taking his gloves off. We're thinking, is he retiring? Then he wants Ngannou, but does he really want him? He didn't like go for it, But oh, all right, Goes. How about you, man? What are your thoughts on the overall event? What you saw Friday morning?
Yeah, it was kind of strange because I was even texting you because I thought I was like in another universe or something. I also kind of give it an A. I thought it was great, and I went into the weekend thinking, okay, with the UFC off, could this just be a good, fun alternative? Especially at the time of day that we were getting it here on the West Coast, it all just kind of worked out. Like Mike mentioned, the finishes, everybody came to fight that night. I think what was really, really impressive was just the way the fighters fought on this card, man. I haven't seen that from some of these guys in previous fights. They really, really made this feel like it should be an important card. The fighters matched that. Even the broadcast team, I thought, had one of their better performances. And like you guys mentioned, the pacing of the cards. I mean, it has been abysmal in the past, right? Like you could go get an oil change in between cards and fights and come back and you're ready for the next fight, right? And it wasn't like that for this one. George and I were kind of joking about it. I think, George, you still kind of thought it was a little bit off, but I actually thought it improved a lot. So the experience overall, I thought was tremendous. The thing that we have to look at moving forward is you got a little bit of momentum, right? So how do you capture that? How do you keep that momentum going? I don't know. We'll talk about that later. But right now, they got me that I was on the hook. And I think if you had a new fan watch the PFL product this weekend, they probably thought it was pretty badass.
Man, whoever's the director, whoever runs the show on production, if they heard that, they'd be like, "Oh man, this guy's coming at us." And
Dude.
oil change, but you're right. You're right. You could get your car washed, an oil change. You can honestly say, "Hey, give me your orders, text them to me. I'm gonna go through a drive-through, be back in time, eat the food, probably use the restroom, and wash your hands, and still come back." And the next fight hasn't started, so they did tighten that up. That's great stuff, Goes. Hey, I'm going to go to the chat early, but the trade-off will be I need you guys to hit the like and subscribe while you're there. Why not, right? This is free content, and it's great content. But the like is important. R1, what's up, Junkie Nation? What's up to you, pal? Mark England, predictions for the pay-per-view. We'll get to those in just a second. Masters of the Universe, hope we're doing well. You too, buddy. Steve Williams, we always see you in here. Thanks for your support. Bruce, we might be out and about this week. Follow us on Instagram and Twitter. You'll see those posted, and you'll see where we might be. There's a lot of stuff going on in Vegas. We'll get to that in just a second. What a panel, says Masters of the Universe. And here's Texans 713. Dakota's the current best women's flyweight in the world. I thought that at the moment. I've been settling down now, but we'll get to it in just a second. But I did think that. And here's a couple more good ones. Joseph Boza says Kayla Harrison versus Taylor Guardino started at noon, if memory served me right. I think he's meant to say midnight. If memory served me right, by 2 a.m. Eastern, Kayla was celebrating her win. So, yeah, I don't know what he meant there, but I do remember these events have been horrific in a while. Lazar says Dachiva to UFC. Who knows? That someday I'd love to see it, but man, she really wowed me. All right, but we're going to start off with the main event. Timur Kizriev defeated Brendan Loughnane in the main event. I want to get a reaction from you guys, and also I'm going to tack on an extra question here. We'll start off with Goes. Is this what the PFL wanted? Goes?
Mm-hmm. Well, look, dude, that performance to me, I thought was tremendous. You look at Brendan Loughnane, this is a guy that takes every bit of the sport serious, right? He always shows up. And I feel like the best Brendan Loughnane showed up. During the fight, could you point to maybe something happening? Yeah, but, he's been able to kind of adjust in other situations. I think this was just more of Timur being an absolute beast. And what impressed me the most about him in this fight was his fighter IQ. He just sort of knew when he heard him, when to kind of put his foot on the gas, when to hit the brake. He was a really, really smart fighter. And did it work out for them? I mean, I think it kind of did. Maybe going in, maybe that's not the result they wanted. But after the performance that he laid on Brendan Loughnane, I mean, he didn't slip past him. He buzzsawed through him. I think they kind of can now look at things and say, hey, look, we have something going here. It's just, how do you promote these guys moving forward? That's always been the issue.
Goes on Junkie Radio yesterday. You said that spinning back kick that Brendan Loughnane threw in round one. I see it there, courtesy of Cold Coffee's B-roll. He threw it with 3 minutes left, and those kicks, him going down to the ground, was kind of the beginning of the end for him. Now we see that he did them maybe too early. The risk wasn't worth it.
Yeah, I mean, I thought it was a big risk to take against a guy like that early. I'm not so sure it's what cost him the fight, but it definitely put him in a really bad position. And that's what I mean by the good fighter IQ, man. That just the timing on all that and being able to capitalize on that. I think it was the beginning of his downfall, but I wouldn't say it cost him the fight. I just think I don't think a lot of fighters, and I mean this across the board, could have beat two more that night.
Mm-hmm. Matt Kizriev, man, impressed. And what do you think? Do you think the PFL can make something out of this guy? Because he did look good. He's undefeated, and he beat a known name, a known commodity in Loughnane. So going forward, does this work out for the PFL somehow, or did they really want Loughnane, you think, to pull through?
No, I think it was a good spot for him. He handled himself obviously very well throughout the fight. I think there were a couple of moments where I think he could have turned up the pressure a little bit more. I don't believe he recognized how hurt Brendan Loughnane was in some spots, especially like with that leg movement. It really appeared like, and the commentary was all over it, talking about how hindered Loughnane was in his movement. And I don't know if that was just a good poker face by Brendan hiding that in the moment in there for Timur, but it felt like there were spots where he could have really turned up a little bit more and perhaps got a finish. But he did a fantastic job of staying in his grill. He busted him up, obviously, made him bleed a lot throughout that fight. So it was a fantastic performance through and through. But to your other question about what can they do with him, it all depends on the matchups, right? Is he going to be a guy that's back in the tournament again next year? I would probably say so. Just because I think he needs more high-profile wins, I guess, in terms of what the PFL can offer, and also some finishes. I mean, everything he did this year was a decision, which is not necessarily always a bad thing, especially when you're an undefeated fighter. But to get that next level of fan interest, you got to put some finishes on the record, man.
No doubt about that. All right, Mike, your thoughts on the main event and both guys. I think they got two killers there, but I think they would have hoped Loughnane could pull through just because he's media savvy. We know who he is, all that.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think they were hoping too much one way or another. I think they've got a lot out of Brendan Loughnane already, like from the hype he had from not being signed to Dana White's Contender Series, and then he came over and really capitalized on all that. And yeah, I mean, it's hard to know. Like, this is one of those ones where, to me, when I was watching it, and obviously this fight was, I think, is as long as all the other fights on the main card combined, so it felt like it just had a little less zest on it, just because it was the only one that wasn't a finish, but it was still a great performance. But as I'm watching, I'm like, man, is this where the kind of tournament and season format catches up with you a little bit? Like, Brendan Loughnane, I think, has had 13 fights in the past 2.5 years, 3 years. Like, that is a lot of action, man. And it's not like these fights for him are all ended in the first round either. Some of them are grueling. So you wonder if like this fight looks different if both guys have a 3-month training camp and don't have all the miles on them. But that would be taking something away from Kizriev, who I think is a very good featherweight and I think is able to hang with a lot of these guys out there. Definitely a breakthrough moment for him. And if PFL can promote him right and capitalize on things, maybe there's something there. But that's kind of the question I raised off the top here, right? With a lot of these winners, how much is that rollover going to happen for you, and how much is this going to really elevate the brand for you globally? I mean, I'm sure the Russians were thrilled with the results on these nights, but in terms of how you carry these guys forward, it's a little bit tough, especially if they do move away from the season format. Like, how sellable is a fight between him and Patricio Pitbull or Aaron Pico or whatever? All good fights, but I'm just not sure what that's really bringing you.
Yeah, those are two good fighters. Exactly, Pico and Patricio. All right. Talib Malik is also pretty stoked. I think he might be Russian. He's got the emojis there for the flag and the money in the chat room. Keep bringing them, folks. Here's a good one, and I'm going to go old school for you guys. Masters of the Universe says Brendan Loughnane won on Contender Series, but didn't get a contract, like Mike just alluded to. Do you think there's a chance we could see him in the UFC considering his age? Guys, you remember in the 1980s, some of you might not have been born. I don't think young Mike Bond was.
No.
But the USFL had Herschel Walker, Steve Young, a few other guys. I think the guy that played for the Houston Oilers, Warren Moon. And man, they finally made it over to the NFL, but they did great. They had great careers, especially Moon, for example, and Steve Young. That's what I'm hoping, that if Loughnane has run his course at PFL, he just got jobbed so hard by the UFC and he's UFC caliber. I hope he can get over there, especially with the UFC splashing the way they have been in the UK. This guy just is an exciting fighter. He's a great talker, and he deserves to be there. And I don't think he wants to do the season format. And does he just stick around for a fight or two? I don't know. But I'm hoping Masters of the Universe. Great question there. Keep bringing them in the chat. I'll get to them. I'm trading those for likes on the video. So let's see if we can make a deal there. All right. Go. What are you laughing at? You can't contain yourself. Is it my USFL reference?
Laughing because the way Mike said nope, dude, I felt so old the second he said
that. Yeah. Thanks for that, Mike. Appreciate it.
Yeah. Let's get to probably the real star of the show. Dakota Ditchova dominated Talia Santos. Your reaction to that goes, and what's Ditchova's potential? And please check me if you think I got way ahead of myself on Saturday when I actually thought she might be the best flyweight in the world.
I don't know what got into you, George. Look, I thought she had a tremendous performance. This is the toughest one yet. She didn't disappoint. She's very well-rounded. She's mentally tough, right? All that time at ATT, I'm sure she's seen a lot of things. We're going to watch this improvement, and it's going to happen gradually. And there's obviously tons of potential, George. I get it. Having somebody like Joanna Jędrzejczyk, right, that has a similar style, I'm sure she's learning a lot. Talia Santos is a good fighter, but I wouldn't say she's a great fighter. I think we still need to I don't know that we could say we have a lot of questions about Dakota. We just need to see if she has consistency, because you look at some of the other girls that would be ranked around her and they would give her one hell of a fight, right? So I think maybe we have to, I hate to say it because, she was so phenomenal and she gets so much of this, but if we're going to call her the best in the world, we got to pump the brakes there. If we're saying she's elite and she deserves to be up towards the top, yes, I absolutely agree with that.
Dude, are you seeing this B-roll? Look at that shot to the body, man. I mean, she fought almost a perfect fight. She's had almost a perfect season, and she whacked someone that took Valentina Shevchenko to a split decision a few years ago. I have settled down since Saturday. I might have gotten ahead of myself, but man, I'm telling you, this chick might be the best flyweight in the world. I shouldn't call her a chick. This young lady. Matt Wells, am I high? Am I tripping?
No, I mean, best in the world is a stretch, but she's definitely in that conversation now and among the top 5, because she just took out the number 5 that we have in our women's flyweight rankings at MMA Junkie, right? So she's definitely up there. Again, it just comes down to what Mike Bond has been harping on, with his card and the PFL in general, is okay, what do you do with her now? Right? Who can test her next? I mean, yes, there's some names out there. There was some criticism coming into this season, this PFL season, about the matchups and where they, positioning her to avoid certain people and things like that, right? So there are some matchups still out there, but man, to your question, yes, she absolutely looks like it. We talk about the eye test, right? She passes the eye test. I think with flying colors. I mean, the striking is incredible. We saw the takedown defense shine here against Santos. I mean, she's just explosive. She's aggressive. She's accurate with her strikes. She's very efficient with her movement. There's a lot to like when you just look at what she does inside the cage, man. She's phenomenal. I'm not ready to call her quite the best in the world yet, because you still got Valentina Shevchenko. You still got Alexa Grasso. You got Manon out there. How would she do against those names? Those are big questions. Erin Blanchfield as well. I mean, some very talented women in the flyweight division, but she's definitely in that conversation now.
Matt, I'm gonna corner you here, like I did Goes. I'm gonna see if I can go 2 for 2. If a millionaire had a briefcase with $1 million and he goes, pick the winner, and you get to keep the money, and it's Ditchova versus Grasso, who would you take?
Oh,
you don't lose anything, but you get the $1 million if you pick the right winner.
I mean, I would have to choose Grasso. I would have
to.
I would have to choose Grasso.
Oh,
we're talking about splitting hairs, I think, at this point. But I'm giving respect to Grasso and her strength of schedule and the biggest stages that she's been on so far. So I'm giving respect to Grasso for all of that and what she's done so far. I mean. You got to give props to Ditchova, man. She's fantastic, but she hasn't put in that same level of work as Alexa Grasso.
Beats Grasso and Namajunas. I think she might have trouble with Blanchfield and Manon Fiorot and Valentina. That's why I said I've settled down since Saturday. But some people are telling me that I'm high in the chat, so I'm pushing back. Mike, what about that? The $1 million challenge. You get to keep this briefcase, pal. You just got to pick the winner of Grasso versus Ditchova. What do you tell that millionaire?
I might pick Dacheva, honestly. I think
That's what's up, McBone.
yeah, she's really good, man. I mean, like, especially that matchup in particular, she'd be a lot bigger than Alexa. I think she'd have the length, the height. Obviously, Alexa's boxing is really good, but Dacheva's kick game, she seems to know the distance really well in these fights. Yeah, I could not have been more impressed with what she did out there. Yeah, she had it all, honestly. Like, yeah, we didn't see her spend significant amount of time on her back, like fending off submissions or anything, but that's because she was a brick wall out there and she couldn't really be taken down. She even kind of reversed Santos at one point in that first round. So yeah, like she ticked all the boxes that you would want to see from her in this fight. How does that work fighting the best girls over and over and over again? Would I say she would beat them all? I don't know. Like, it's hard for anyone to do that these days, to just run through a division. These people are all getting pretty damn good. But yeah, like, how could you not be happy with this if you're her team? PFL, she's their youngest season winner ever at like 26 years old and change. So that's like a huge thing for them. This isn't even her peak or her prime right now, but yeah, man, she's everything she said she was going to be. Like, I think when she talked to Nolan King ahead of this fight, she basically predicted a second round finish, said, I'm going to make this look like I did all the other fights. And she went out and did that to Santos, who just seemed completely lost out there after she wasn't able to get the first takedown and was getting hit with some big strikes. So yeah, man, this was like an A++, a breakthrough performance. And she is, I think, PFL's like number one person you're circling right now, trying to push and hold on to. I know we're talking about UFC crossovers here, but look how hard it was for Kayla Harrison to get out of there and get over to the UFC. I think if you're Dawn Davis, Pete Murray, all those people over there, you're doing everything in your power to keep her with PFL as long as humanly possible. And I think that's going to be the case for at least the next couple of years here.
Yeah, I'm glad Don Davis isn't on the panel, though, because he doesn't know anybody else outside the PFL, so he couldn't make the comparisons. What were you going to say, Matt Wills?
I want to modify my answer a little bit, okay? Because the chat is going crazy. You know, they're saying Dakota would get smoked by Grasso.
Really?
If UFC 306 Grasso shows up, Dakota wins. If UFC 285 Grasso shows up, Grasso wins.
Okay. I feel that George actually won me over. I did say I would take her over Grasso, but $1 million doesn't go as long as you think it does, Georgia. You better save that money, because if we bring that briefcase out for a couple other fighters that we were talking about, I don't think you go that way.
Well, I named them. I know she's got some tough matchups up there. I think she beats Barber, Namajunas. I think she beats look, Santos. Part of why I think Dakota Ditcheva is actually a really burgeoning star here. I thought Santos showed up in great shape. She looked strong and lean, and she was trying using technique and power to get her to the ground, and she couldn't do it. And that's why I was like, holy cow, Ditcheva is even better than I thought. She's learning. She's just getting better. I think Santos is one of the top 5 flyweights in the world, honestly, and she really did show up in good shape. But man, Ditcheva just impressed me. I mean, Cole Covey just showed us about 8 or 9 solid techniques: the punch to the body, the knee to the body, the elbows, whether they were landing or not, the up elbows, leg kicks. How about that one when she went straight to the grill, a la Anderson Silva and Vitor Belfort? Like I say, she knows how to use her range. She's a killer, dude. And I don't know what the PFL is going to do. If they throw in her season, I guess she's just going to mop them up too. And if she just waits for one fight, who's that fight going to be? I suppose technically, Mike, is Liz Carmouche still the Bellator flyweight champion? She didn't bring the belt over, right? So they could do the series there that they're doing or whatever.
Yep, they could do that. I would assume that would be the next move here. If you're trying to build Dakota's resume with as many former UFC title challengers and things like that as possible. Obviously, a Bellator champion. So yeah, I hope they do that fight next. And especially after seeing this, we know what Liz Carmouche's game is for most of her fights. And if Dacheva can fend her off like she did Santos, that's might be a very rough night for Liz.
With the retirement fight for Liz. Would the PFL be crazy enough to do Ditcheva versus Cyborg? I know it's 2 weight classes, and is that just a whole other animal?
You keep those two as far away from each other as you possibly can.
Because in a way, we're entertaining Pereira versus Jones. One was once a middleweight, the other one's now a current heavyweight. They're both probably more light heavyweights.
And Cyborg's talking about fighting Clarissa Shields at like 175. So let's maybe throw that idea out the window for now.
One more Dakota comment like that, George, and George Pirro is going to knock on our door. We're going to have you tested because you might be high at that point, I think. There's no way they do that. No way.
No.
But you guys agree that she beats Liz, right? Carmouche.
Probably.
would
I mean,
think so.
again, we don't
Yeah,
know
hard
about
to
the
know.
ground game prolonged. Like, if Liz can actually get her down and hold her there, maybe. Like, we don't know. But that first layer of takedown defense seems like it's going to be pretty tough to get through. What comes after that, I don't know. Still untested.
In 3 seconds, a shoe is going to hit Mike Bond in the head. It's going to be his fiance going, "You're giving away $1 million. We're getting married. We can pay for the wedding, the house. Stop it, Mike. You know
Yeah,
this is that fight."
Jack table with Dana White, and I'll be paid for it.
That's right. There are some people that take that cash. All right. Well, listen, I think she's great. I'll go back and circle in and see what the comments look like. Tell me what you guys think of Ditcheva's potential. Can she beat the stars over in the UFC? I think she can. Santos came up a little bit short, but was she one of the better pickup skills free agency for the PFL?
I mean, I think she served her purpose, right? I don't know what you really do with her going forward. There's still a lot of questions. Her value was in putting Ditcheva over, right? And that happened. So now what do you do with her? I don't know. I think if she would have been more competitive in the fight, you could maybe sell a rematch down the road, but that didn't really happen. And she's only getting older. So it was a good pickup for what it was used for. But at this point, I don't know really what the value is.
Pettis, Stevens, McDonald, Verdum, I think she might have been the best one for serving a purpose and, almost getting the millie there. Guys, another highlight from the event. We'll hurry up on this one. Mike Bond, what else did you like from Friday morning?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, as we kind of alluded to earlier, it was the Russian dominance in these title fights, and I guess the one I'll highlight, a lot of them did great, right? But Gadzi, who won the lightweight title, was obviously, beating Brent Primus, a former Bellator champion, like that, unreal. But I think the big storyline to come out of this is the dominance in lightweight of Team Khabib Nurmagomedov, right? Like, they have lightweight champions now in the UFC, obviously Islam Makhachev, Bellator, Usman Nurmagomedov, and now PFL with Gadzi here. And that's just, if you're trying to continue the legacy of Abdulmanap and into what Khabib has done with his coaching footprint, definitely should get some shout outs for Coach of the Year discussion coming up this year. Like, it's been a very impressive kind of next layer of what these guys have done. So yeah, lightweight out there is dominated by this team in every major promotion. So that's really impressive. And I can't imagine the pressure kind of on Gadzi coming into this, looking at his teammates, looking at the success and having to go out there, and he delivers a great performance and great knockout. So yeah, these guys are running 155 all across the globe right now. It's insane.
They need to send one over to one championship. All right. How about you, Matt Wells?
I was very impressed with the performance from Dovlet Yagshimuradov, if I pronounced that correctly. Yags for short on the internet, as we call him. But incredible performance against Impa. I mean, if you consider what Impa Kasangana has done since going to the PFL, it seemed like he became a completely different fighter. He's just started destroying people, and you can credit that to the level of competition. But Yags went out there and just put it on him quick. He didn't let him get settled in, and just put those paws on him with a sharp counter right hook right there that rocked him, and then just stayed on him to finish the fight in less than a minute. So that was super impressive for me. He seems like a guy that can get a lot of fanfare as well. I mean, he seems like he's got a good personality on him. He wears the hat that people like as well. So got to give it up to him for that.
Cold Coffee showing off now, man. He's timely with that B-roll. All right, how about you guys? Another highlight.
I thought it was really cool to finally see Dennis Goldslav get it done. 5 seasons, that's a long time. And to get it done in the way he did, I was pretty happy for the guy. That's tremendous, and glad he finally got paid.
That was Fedor's teammate, Popov, that he got, and it reminded me of Verdum and Fedor. I wonder if Fedor was trembling there, remembering his first loss ever against Verdum in that same submission. I'm going to go with Shamil Musayev. I'll make it quick. Ever since I watched this guy earlier this year, this guy's a stud, man. He's just got a really strong upper body. He really focuses on fighting off takedowns, all of his concentrations on that. And then when he has his moments, he explodes. He's got a nice left hook. Thank you, Cold Coffee, right there. I mean, it's nice, fast, sharp, everything. This guy's a killer. I think he could compete with any 170 guy in the world. Bilal Muhammad that beat Leon Edwards does look like obviously unbeatable at this point. We'll see how he does now that he's the champ. He's got an injury that he's coming off of, but that guy looked phenomenal. So I'm not going to go that far. But Musayev does look like he can beat some of these other 170 guys in the UFC, or if he chooses to stay, fine. But congrats to him. Excellent season. We move on, though. The PFL, the fighters, the employees, now they got time off for the holidays. And so we want to hand out some report cards, right? How did the PFL do since their first year with Bellator talent being sprinkled in, some Bellator shows, it's its own franchise, all that. Real quick, are they, to your liking, underperforming, overperforming? Mike Bond, will go to you.
Ooh, definitely not overperforming. That one's for sure. But yeah, I mean, it's tough. Nolan King and I had like a kind of conversation about this on my podcast last week, and we gave out some grades. And I think Nolan's was like a D+ for the year in review for PFL, just because this was coming on the end of all the fighter complaints, just a lot of stuff behind the scenes going on that I think really kind of hurt the image. I will say maybe like I tended to agree with him. I think this final event here, just the way it played out, maybe bumps them up to like a C or something like that. But that still doesn't alleviate all the issues they've had. I mean, this merger, acquisition, whatever you want to call it, with Bellator has been largely a disaster. I mean, they planned out 8 events. Bellator Champion Series event only ended up doing 5. Promised there would be 2 title fights on all of them. I think only one of them had 2 title fights on it. So like it did not go as they wanted. And then now we're in the midst of fighters complaining, fighters asking for releases. There's a lot of stuff going on here. So it's hard to push all that to the wayside and just kind of forget about it. But I guess some high points like this event, Dakota Cheba, what she did this year was a huge thing for them. Getting Francis Ngannou to fight, it was huge for them. So there is a couple high points, but yeah, there's a lot of stuff they need to still figure out here to kind of right the ship in 2025, because you having like, it's one thing for low level fighters who you're maybe paying minimum purses to and things like that, complaining about inactivity, when you have your champions in Bellator, some of your biggest names, the ones that you imagine should have been prioritized when you made this acquisition, being like, what the hell is going on? No one is communicating with me or my team. I was told I was going to have a fight. Now it's off. All this stuff. It's just a real bad look. So they need to prioritize getting all that figured out ASAP here, because this is really bad for the industry if it continues to go this way.
Goes, what kind of a grade would you hand out? Are they underperforming or overperforming?
I'd probably say underperforming. Look, you want to know what that whole vision is going to be like, right? When all those fighters merge over, I think they can do something with that. It's maybe kind of like college sports, where the first year it's kind of hard to judge them on things when you have a new coach. But I think the fact that they lost Kayla Harrison and replaced her with Dakota Ditcheva, I thought that was excellent. I thought it was great that Francis Ngannou fought. I thought this last card was great. But everything else that Mike said,
that was pretty good.
What's up?
They got Cyborg Pacheco to fight. That was pretty good.
Yeah. But everything else that Mike stated, it hurt, man, throughout the year. It really didn't help them out. So I would probably maybe say C to C+, somewhere in that range.
Mm-hmm. Mike, Matt Wells, how about you? What are your thoughts here?
Yeah, I'm in the same range right there. I mean, you can't have these big names, like the biggest names that are under your umbrella, complaining about their activity. You got to get these guys fights. A lot of people, are over the season format. I'm not one of them. I actually think there is a place for a season format. I think it keeps up a level of interest for fighters that people would not otherwise necessarily care about. So, I think that there's a place for that, but also you have to increase the activity for these guys that are not. So like all of these Bellator fighters, I don't know if you want to combine them with the PFL roster more frequently or whatever have you, but you have to figure out a way to increase the activity for these guys that are familiar names and that are on the internet complaining about not being able to fight and make a living for their families. So you got to be able to fix that, and you got to be able to fix it quickly. And I know Peter Murray just said that, they plan to increase the number of events year over year over the next couple of years. So we'll see how that actually plays out. But yeah, it's never a good look to have your roster complaining about not being able to get a fight.
What did they do that you liked, Matt, in 2024?
I mean, for me, the highlight was the finale. And that was largely just because of the way the pacing and the way the fights ended up playing out. I mean, it still could have, on paper, this still had potential to be one of the most dreadful events of the year because of the number of title fights and the number of fights in general. It doesn't need to be 16 fights. It doesn't need to be that many title fights as well. Either break it up into 2 different events or whatever have you. Like, figure out a way to make this more efficient, and don't bank on the fact of every fight's going to be a finish. Because could you imagine if we had to sit through 25 minutes of 6 title fights on that event? We would be having a very different conversation right now about how that event played out. So they got lucky with all of the finishes, but that was really the highlight of the season for me. Otherwise, I mean, you can't overlook these other issues, man. The Bellator side, I mean, I think unless if there's like a contractual thing to where they have to keep the Bellator brand alive for a certain amount of time, just put it all under one umbrella. Like, it's kind of confusing as well to the casual fan. You have the PFL regular season, you have the PFL super fights, and you have the Bellator series, and then you have PFL Europe. You have so many PFL MENA, like why not just call it one thing and have this massive roster of fighters? I just don't understand why they're doing it this way. I don't.
Mike, are they a true rival to the UFC in any way?
No, not right now. I mean, I think the best thing going for them on that side is the platform, right? Being on ESPN Plus and having like the similar distribution as the UFC, so you can look at them a little bit on the same level. It would be very interesting if the UFC does end up leaving ESPN when its television rights are up, and how ESPN's, I guess, attentiveness or maybe lack thereof towards PFL might change in the wake of that. But right now, yeah, it's hard to imagine. We can have a couple conversations about this fighter here or there. Would they be competitive in the UFC? But that's ultimately like, doesn't really matter, because I don't think a lot of these matchups are realistic in the short term unless someone can escape out of there. So yeah, I mean, it's a little bit of a rough side right now. They need to figure something out, I think, to get on that level. I think the biggest comparisons you can make are the platform and a couple select fighters here and there. But in terms of like, you know, no one, Dana White and the UFC aren't losing sleep over what PFL is doing. I can guarantee you that.
Do you agree with Matt, Mike, that you should just put them all in PFL, or should they still keep them separate, I guess?
No, absolutely merge it. I don't know how you pull that off or what you do. Like, you know, do you go to these champions and say, hey, like, your belt is suddenly obsolete now, it doesn't matter? Do you do combined like unification fights with another PFL versus Bellator event? I don't know. It seems like it is being phased out slowly. Like this event on January 25th in Dubai, you look at like the press release and the things they've sent out on it, there's pretty much no reference to Bellator at all. The only reference is that Usman Nurmagomedov is the Bellator lightweight champion, but the event is just called like Champion Series Road to Dubai, which is seemingly like a sponsored thing. So yeah, there's like, I don't know, there's not really much remnants of Bellator left at this point. So it seems like it is going that way.
If they do come over though, guys, that's a lot of fighters in each weight class. I mean, I couldn't tell you or quote you what the roster's like. And it looks like they start with 12 in every weight class. And whoever has the points, the top 4, move on. I think some people are going to get left out. That's why I'm wondering if we merge them all so quick. It can't be that easy to also just, I'm not defending PFL, but to buy another organization and then just figure it out. The communication's been poor, but figuring it out will take a while. And that's why I wonder if they can put them all under another banner. I'd like to see it, but I also believe they should abandon regular season. The only thing I think they should do is do a Grand Prix for one weight class, like the middleweights. They don't have a middleweight. Let's do a Grand Prix. The winner gets $1 million. Johnny Eblin, Impa come back. Everyone else, whatever. Even that Diaz looks like he's a middleweight guy, or whatever. Figure that out. But the rest, let's create a champ, or let's crown a champ, or let's keep a champ, and then just make an arena series.
Interesting. See, I like the season though. I mean, I know I'm kind of like on an island a little bit there, because I mean, let's be honest, guys. How much would we care if the winners of these championship fights were just having a regular fight without $1 million on the line, right? Like, we get to follow like the story throughout the year, right? That they win these fights, they make it through the playoffs, and then they fight for $1 million. If they weren't fighting for $1 million, I don't see the same level of interest in a lot of these fights, to be honest. So I think that there's something there added to it, but you have to make that work for everybody. You don't have to do all of the championship fights on one card. You can break it up. You can make it more efficient for the fan watching at home. I think there's different ways to do it, but still keep that season.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I think that's correct. You could maybe do less too and focus on like a couple weight classes instead of doing 6. Maybe that would be more helpful. I don't know. There's multiple ways they can go. But.
What do you make of these fighters asking for a release? They were very vocal on Twitter Like there's a lack of communication. They just want out, I guess. Not a good look.
It's terrible look, and look, they don't like being held in the dark, and I get that. Like there's it's one thing to have fights fall off and all that, but to not really know about it, to have to ask, that's just terrible. Time is money in our sport, and you have a lot of fighters, especially some of these Bellator fighters that are like they're starting to be in their prime and they're just sitting on the bench, and that cannot work, right? They have to figure out a way to smooth that over because it really just is a terrible look.
Yeah. Brian John in the chat says, simply put, PFL cannot honor the existing Bellator contracts. And Scott Christian says, fighting for $1 million is called fighting for the belt. Masters of the Universe says, I never understood how it works from a business perspective from them. It seems like they give out more than they earn. It's as someone with money just did it for fun. LOL. Some people have said that. Patchy Mix, Liam McCord, Corey Anderson, Patricio Frady, even Chris Cyborg, I think, started chiming in. Those are some talented fighters who could do well for themselves if they went to the UFC. Some of them have been with the UFC. We'll see how this thing plays out. Oh boy, I just sounded like Dana White. I think we have to move on though. Listen, UFC 310 is this weekend. It's UFC's final pay-per-view of the year. Top to bottom, it's pretty solid, folks. But needle movers, I don't see many of them. But again, some well-known fighters, respected fighters that have paid their dues are on the card. It's our job to cover it, and we will do a fine job as always. Do you feel the buzz for UFC 310? And what would you grade the card going in?
Not a buzz yet. I think it'll start once you give Ian Gary a mic, but everybody else has a mic. It's not going to really do too much, right? So I think it's really going to have to come down to some of those fighters on the undercard to promote a little bit. Going in, I have it somewhere around a B minus maybe. But look, I think there's a lot of fights that they may not tell a lot about what the picture is moving forward in a division. They're just kind of fun fights. And so I think overall the fight card's going to be a lot of fun.
You feeling the buzz, Mike Bond, or is this not one to your liking?
No, I like the card. I don't know what the definition of feel the buzz is here in 2024 when it comes to UFC events. If you look at ticket sales that are kind of going around the seating maps, it looks like they are struggling a little bit. I do not expect this to be a sellout. So a little bit on that front, but like if you're a UFC fan, you can't look at this card and look at all the names on there and like not be excited. This is better top to bottom lineup than probably half the pay-per-views this year. It's just kind of missing that big cornerstone main event. If we were still getting Bilal and Shavkat or whatever second title fight on here, I think it really changes it. But for better or worse, the flyweights headlining a pay-per-view card is always just going to be a tricky sell. You have literally a debuting UFC fighter on one side of this, and then Pantoja, who's not going to give you a whole lot in terms of, going out there and selling a fight. So that makes it difficult, but like the fights are good. There's some important ones on here. So yeah, I'm looking forward to it.
Steve Williams in the chat says, definitely pumped for 310. Strong B+. Mohammed Barry says, this UFC fanboys, UFC journalists, not MMA journalists. Hey, Pelican, we just spent fucking 40 minutes on PFL. Why are you tripping, man? I mean, did you just join the party or what? Holy cow. I mean, at least know where you stand when you're trying to dole out a bag. All right, Matt Wells, are you feeling the buzz despite Mohammed Barry's input?
I don't, to Mike's point, like what is buzz, right? I am excited for the card because there are a lot of familiar names throughout. And I really think the main event is actually like flying way under the radar. As I've said before, like this is the closest thing we're going to get to a cross-promotional fight in the UFC, bringing in a former Ryzen champion to fight for a title in his first fight. And I love that. I love it. I think Alexander Pantoja is a fantastic fighter. He's been through wars against the best in his division. And now we get to see him fight a former champion of another promotion. It's fantastic. I think all of the big buzz, so to speak, is for the co-main event in Shavkat and Ian Gary, because, obviously those personalities, those performances have spoken for themselves throughout their careers. And I think a lot of people are going to be tuning in for that fight. But, man, that main event, I think, is going to be something special that's flying under the radar.
Joseph Bose is saying that Crone Gracie and Bryce Mitchell are on the main card. Is that true, guys? Or did I just...
Yep.
And so really Movsar Evloev, who's undefeated, and Aljamain Sterling, who's a former champ, are not.
Correct.
Wow. I feel like they're dropping the ball on that one because even though the other two may not be the most stylistic appealing type, it's two that might cancel each other out, and they bring resumes. You know, Chrome Gracie, for crying out loud, he hadn't fought in 4 years. Club just pieced him up. Someone else, yeah, he started off good, but he's 36 years old. Respect to what he did at Abu Dhabi, but man, this is that's just. I'm throwing.
It's not worth stressing about, honestly. Like, we could get to Friday and they could change this whole thing. Like, they do this all the
I
time.
certainly hope they do.
I certainly hope they do.
Is Pantoja the most underrated champion? Why or why not, Mike Bond?
Ooh, the most underrated current champions, I guess so. Just because, like, I don't know, it's hard to say that because how many champions do we have right now who like don't even have a title defense or one title defense? He's like one of the few who's actually been a long term in the UFC. So I guess so. I mean, that's always kind of part of the territory when it comes to flyweight. And as I said earlier, he doesn't necessarily knock your socks off when it comes to promoting the fight. We have an interview I did with him a few days ago on the YouTube channel right now, and he was good. I mean, you can tell he's focused. He doesn't overlook the task at hand, all that kind of stuff. But yeah, I mean, he's not going to give you these crazy headlines or anything. But in terms of skill sets, sure, like he's a fantastic fighter. He is 9-0 against current fighters ranked in the top 10 of the UFC flyweight division, which is absolutely incredible. So yeah, I mean, there's no one that's really dominating a division the way he is right now. So I think you'd have to answer that question as yes.
Yeah, no, profoundly. All right. Is he the second best flyweight ever, in your opinion? Has he at least gained that?
I think he's right there, man. You know, right next to him, I'd have Henry Cejudo. I'd love to see what a fight of those two guys in their prime would have looked like, but he does deserve more credit than he gets, and he just quietly does his job. But little by little, you know, every year when we have our end of the year discussions, you look at the stuff this guy's done is pretty amazing, and I think he's only going to add to it.
Matt Wells, what's the best result in the main event for the UFC? Stick with the champ, Pantoja, or the land of the rising sun? It's always a good thing if there's a star coming out of that country, a champion. I have to believe that as much as an appeal as it was to get into China, and they have, getting back to Japan, where a lot of this has originated, would be big, right?
Yeah, it would be huge. And as much as I agree with like Pantoja, you know, being like a underrated or flying under the radar champion, so to speak, I think the best for business result here would be a win for Kai Asakura, because not only do you get all of those things that you just mentioned, George, but you also get a whole slew of new, fresh championship matchups against a guy that has never fought any of these other guys in the UFC before. Whereas if Pantoja wins, we're looking at rematches through two different Brandons and everybody else down the roster, right? So I think the best for business move is for the regional success in Japan and all of the fresh championship matchups going forward. And then we can have all sorts of conversations about who deserves the next shot and all that kind of stuff like that. And I think that would just be, you know, the one thing that the UFC would really benefit from.
It has been rematch central, man, at 125 pounds. That's for sure. How funny would it be if they rematch Asakura and Pantoja if they have a classic? Shavkat Rakhmonov versus Ian Gary. Should it have been for the interim? Mike Bond. It's a number one contender, but should it have been for the interim? And we do know it's a 5-rounder.
I'm going to say no. I think they made the right call just because from the sounds of it, Bilal Muhammad isn't going to be out all that long. Like, he sounds like he could be ready to fight by March. And you know, how many times have we sat on the show and criticized the UFC for over abusing the interim titles or putting it in place when it doesn't make sense? They think made the right call here. I think maybe there was some perks offered to both guys, like contractually wise, that maybe you would get if you were fighting for an interim title anyways within this fight. So I don't think it like matters too much. I don't know if it's going to be pay-per-view points or just more money for this fight in particular, but yeah, I think, you know, this is one of the right calls to kind of not do it, just given the shit we've given the UFC over the years for putting so many of these interim titles in place when they didn't fully make sense. But Dana White has made it clear. I think it's pretty clear to most of us, like, this is a title eliminator. It's a number one contender fight. You got two guys, 33-0 combined record, which, you know, you don't get this very often. So yeah, I do think they made the right call avoiding that this time around.
You agree? Should it have been for the interim, or you like the way it is?
No, I think it worked out perfect, and I think there are those incentives, you know, that kind of made it worth their time. And props to Shavkat for taking this fight. I think everything actually worked out the way it should have, which is not something we normally say, right, when it comes to the UFC and their decisions.
Matt, both of these guys are undefeated. So I wanted you to concentrate here on this question. It might be a trick question. I don't know. Who's shown more promise and star power? Or might it be one of each? I don't know. Because one guy is undefeated, all finishes, but the other guy's one hell of a talker and pot stirrer.
Yeah, I think that's the fact that would make a bigger star, right? Is what you do on the mic. He's got the Irish support as well, right? I think Gary is going to be the bigger potential star just based on those things. He gets the crowd riled up, as you can see in this another wonderfully timed B-roll clip from Cold Coffee right there, right? He gets the crowd amped up before he even does what he does inside the cage, which has also been fantastic. Undefeated record that always speaks volumes as well. So I would have to go with him. But man, people really love Shavkat. There's something about the guy that doesn't say anything on the mic as well. Like as much as everybody falls in love with the super brash trash talker, whether you love him or hate him, the guy that doesn't say much at all, that just shows up and kicks ass every single time, also draws a certain level of interest. But I would have to lean Gary if I'm picking one.
Speaking of leans, that's my next question. Which way you all leaning? I'll stay with you, man. Go ahead.
Man. You know what? I'm gonna say Gary. And when I say Gary, I'm literally like fence riding this fight. I'm probably gonna submit my pick at the very last moment. I need to see how they're looking at fight week, maybe a face off, whatever have you. Like I don't know, man. This is such a good fight on paper. It's very hard to pick. Both guys are very talented. Undefeated again, man. This is a hard fight to pick for me.
All right, how about you guys?
I think Shavkat. I think his pressure on Gary is just going to keep him on the defensive for more of the fight than he wants. So that'll be my pick.
It's that big octagon too. That does help out Gary, man. That guy the way he just creates space is incredible. But Shavkat's a beast. How about you, Mike Bond? What's your early lean? Or is this your final pick? Is it a slam dunk?
I don't know if it's a slam dunk. I want to give myself a little bit of an opening just to see how these guys interact and how they look. But right now, I do feel I'm leaning a little towards Shavkat. I mean, it's hard to pick against a guy who hasn't lost a fight, let alone made it to a decision and finished every single opponent. There has been, some dicey moments for Ian Gary in the UFC. You could probably pick, one or two fights that maybe there's an argument he should have lost on the scorecards. So there's none of that with Shavkat because he's never even been to the scorecards. So until I see someone, I guess, take him beyond a point that we've seen him pushed as of now, I feel like you just got to continue picking him until proved otherwise.
Not to mention the stories coming out of Killcliff, but hey.
Yeah, there's that whole element. I mean, how much, obviously he's been training for this date and this card and was training for a championship fight, like the highest level for several months. Ian has seemingly been all over the place. He started, I think, his camp in Brazil, then he was in Thailand and doing all this stuff. And, it seems like that has worked out well for him. He likes to be a bit of a globetrotter that, whether you believe the stories of him being kind of sent away from certain gyms or not, that's kind of led to this approach he's taken to the sport. And it has seemed like it meshes well with his personality and all his stuff. So who's to say? But if you look at kind of who has seemingly had the less bumpy road to this fight, you got to imagine it's Shavkat, considering he was scheduled for the date from day one.
Do you know if he was just getting looks, or is he no longer with Shootbox? Looked like he had found a home at Shootbox.
No, I think he still is. Again, He'll talk about that this week, I'm sure. But I think like I saw him post an Instagram video where he was like, representing Shootbox from here in Thailand or something like that.
Folks, we're going to cover it top to bottom. So focus on MMA Junkie throughout the week. This channel here will have a lot of content, but yeah, I mean, we're going to put it all out there, the countdowns, the embeddeds, and all the different stories, the one-on-ones. One thing we ask here is if you can hit the like button on this and any content that you see. It's so easy to do, and it helps us out a ton, and that gives us more resources to continue covering the sport and do the excellent job that we do. Subscribe to the channel. It can't hurt, right? And if you hit that little bell, it'll notify you when we're on live. We're almost done here. Don't forget, UFC 310 is this weekend. Goz and I will be doing a watch along starting at 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific. That's the 4 feature prelims on prior to the main card, which is a pay-per-view, and that's at 10 p.m. Eastern, 7 p.m. Pacific. If you choose not to get the pay-per-view, Goes and I will be your eyes and ears. Tune into us, and our colleague Farah Hanoun will be doing a preview show at 5 p.m. Eastern, 2 p.m. Pacific, and she'll preview the card there with all the latest info. How did they look at the weigh-ins throughout the week? What's that, Mike? You're on the show?
Yeah, I'll be on with Far.
Okay, he'll be on there. That's good stuff there. That's a nice 1-2 punch. Hey, how about Gon and Volkov? You know, these are some big guys, talented guys. One's a former interim champ. The other guy's been on a roll. What do you think, Matt? What do you like out of these big dudes? You even have a prediction for us, or how do you see this fight playing out?
I think there'll be a finish for sure. Which way it goes, I would probably lean Gon to win this fight. But both of these guys are just kind of stuck in a position right now, like right outside that heavyweight title picture, to where no matter what happens, they're not going to be next up for a title, unless if the UFC decides to make another interim title defense for Tom Aspinall. So who knows? They're kind of in a weird spot. But I think Gon's going to figure out a way to get this one done.
That's the thing. These last few months, all we're thinking is Miocic, Jones, and Aspinall. We forgot these are two pretty good guys. Goes, where do they fit into this title picture? It does look like if Jones sticks around, he might fight Aspinall. We know Miocic is now out of the whole equation, but these two should be fighting for something, I imagine.
What is it though? That's the problem, right? As long as John Jones is at the top of that division, there is no division. There's John Jones, there's Tom Aspinall, the ghost of Francis Ngannou, and then everything else, right? There's so much uncertainty. We have no idea from fight to fight what's going to happen with John Jones. It's got to be very frustrating for those guys underneath. They're just going to keep. It's going to be a revolving door. They got to keep trying to keep that streak going. But as long as John Jones is at the top, there's just uncertainty at the top of the division.
Mike, we covered this early. Evloev and Sterling, fair or foul, man, on the prelims as of this moment. You covered the UFC for a long time, so you know how their workings are. I just can't put my head around why Kron Gracie and Bryce Mitchell would be there and not these guys. In the past, we used to hear we need a fight to sell the pay-per-view, but then part of the argument why they might not even be on the main card is because they're not sellable products when they fight. They tend to go to decisions and maybe grapple more than what most fans want. What are your thoughts on this?
It's hard to say. I mean, like Aljamain Sterling didn't do himself any favors with the UFC 300 performance. I feel like Movsar Evloev has never had a fight that's not gone to a decision in the UFC. It's been all decisions for him. So maybe that's some of the thinking. Like, you don't want to have a momentum killer in the middle of your main card, but also like these guys deserve it given their rankings and their acumen and stuff. So it's a weird one. I mean, I can't get too worked up about it just because this, first of all, could change. And second of all, we're going to be there watching all the fights anyways. So me watching Aljamain Sterling an hour and a half earlier than we would have if he was on the pay-per-view, like, isn't going to bother me too much. So I don't know, like a respect thing. I definitely get it. Aljo spoke out on it. We have a story on the site about that being like, okay, I'm a main card fighter. I'm going to show the UFC they messed up with the spot. So it seems like there is a bit of a motivation there, but yeah, you just look at the style matchup. I can see it a little bit, but on the other side, people are like, they put it on the prelims because they'll draw more attention and more eyeballs like towards the build up to the pay-per-view. But if it's going to be a bad fight, you almost want to give it to them on the pay-per-view when it's already paid for and stuff too. So I don't know. There's a counterbalance to all this stuff.
There is.
I'm not going to freak out about it, but yeah, I wish it was higher, and it's, a very important fight for this featherweight division.
I was just going to ask you, what does this fight mean for featherweights, for these two?
It's really hard to say. I mean, I guess Max Holloway gone. That's kind of out there, but we assume, even though Evloev has beat Diego Lopez, I think Diego Lopez is still ahead of him in the title queue right now. So I assume we're going to get the Volkanovski Topuria rematch, maybe in April or around that range. And then will Diego fight someone else to kind of get there? Will he get the title shot after? I don't know. I feel like these guys probably are going to have to win one more after this.
Goes, give me another highlight from this event. Somebody that's not getting any shine, maybe gets buried amongst this talented, stacked UFC 310 card that you think might steal the show.
Well, like I said, I think a lot of fights on here are just going to be fun fights, and I think one that's going to be a lot of fun. It's going to be that cartoon where you see that bubble and just fists and feet flying everywhere. That's going to be Guida and Hooper. I think those guys are going to murder each other. And who knows? You know, every time Clay Guida steps in there, we wonder when's it going to be the last one for him here in Vegas. A good win, maybe. You never know, but I think that'll be a fun fight.
Which one's yours, Matt? Who steals the show on Saturday night?
I think Max Griffin and Michael Chiesa is going to be a fun fight. I'm just a fan of both of these guys in general. They both seem like good dudes. You know, they don't really get themselves into any trouble. And they just show out. They show up and they really just, you know, give it their all every time they fight. Max Griffin's a guy who's very competitive in every single fight. I mean, even the loss against Michael Morales, he won that first round, but then Michael Morales is just a dog. He's like the future of that division, I think. So he's always a competitive fighter. And I just like his style. And then, you know, Chiesa, like I said, is a good dude. And he's also super competitive in a lot of his fights. And he's coming off that win over Tony Ferguson there. So I think that's going to be an interesting one. But let me chime in real quick on the Evelev Sterling thing.
Sure.
Like, it's just a respect thing for me, the placement, right? You got a former champion who moved to division, won his first fight in that new division, fighting an undefeated fighter who could be potentially fighting for a title, you know, in one fight or in the next fight. And you're putting that underneath a matchup between, you know, two guys that are coming off of losses. It just doesn't make sense. You know, respect for me is what it is. I mean, if you're talking about getting eyeballs on the prelims, put the guy who brought the Bible into the cage and screamed freedom. You know, put that guy on the prelims, right? That should bring eyeballs, right?
Yeah, I agree, man. You know, he's undefeated for a reason, and the other guy's a former champ. This might be the fight that breaks out for them. Mike, how about you? Who do you want to shed a spotlight on?
We'll give a little to Randy Brown and Brian Battle. I think that's a fight that's probably going to get someone into the rankings after that at welterweight. Both have been looking exceptional over the past few years. Obviously, Brian Battle's coming off that very memorable fight in Paris, the post-fight interview and all that. So, yeah, I think both these guys are clicking right now. And, yeah, actually, like an important fight. This is some good matchmaking with these two. I really love this fight. But since Matt chimed in on another topic at the end of his, I will just say about Cyril Gane and Alexander Volkov, the funniest outcome for the division would be Alexander Volkov winning, because even if John Jones retires and he's, you know, gone, and you have looking at someone for Tom Aspinall, the big fight that, you know, Cyril Gane's been ducking him, allegedly, all this stuff, turning it down. If he loses, obviously Tom Aspinall beat Volkov not that long ago. So that would be a really tricky sell, even though he's looked really great since then. So yeah, that heavyweight division, I think Volkov winning is like a complete shit show for it, but we'll see what happens.
Mike is here for the chaos.
Yes.
Yeah. There was a comment in the chat. It comes from Facebook. We are live on YouTube and Facebook. It's from 40's Glass. He says, I'm excited for Dominic Reyes' fight. He's going to make it the greatest comeback of his career. Listen, that guy was written off, and he was taking some brutal KOs, but he did win a fight earlier this year against Dustin Jacoby, who actually fought in kickboxing, professional kickboxing. Yet Dominic knocked him out. So yeah, if he can come back and take out Anthony Smith, that'd be a big year and a big comeback. So that was a nice shout out to him, fellow Lakers fan. But Goes was talking about cartoon characters and dust, and that Nate Landwehr, man, he is a talker. He's exciting. And Doo-Hoo Choi, am I not mistaken? This is the same South Korean fellow that got in the Hall of Fame, right? With Cub Swanson for that epic fight I think they had in Tennessee a few years ago. So this one I'm expecting could definitely steal the show. Keep an eye on that one. And folks, we're going to cover this top to bottom. We got a team ready to hustle for you on the ground. And like I say, all kinds of stories coming in. So there's no place other than to go to MMA Junkie throughout the week. Just hit that refresh every 20 minutes. There's some new content up there for you. We're going to cover it top to bottom. Don't forget the World MMA Awards is this week as well. Good luck to MMA Junkie. Good luck to Nolan King. We have another show on this YouTube channel called Overreaction. They are taking the week off, but you can catch them every Tuesday, noon Eastern, 9 a.m. Pacific. The same time you can catch Spinning Back Clique every Monday, noon Eastern, 9 a.m. Pacific. And lastly, Goes and I will be hosting a watch-along for UFC 310 on Saturday. It all starts with a preview show. Mike Bond joining Farah Hanoun at 5 Eastern. And then at 8 Eastern, Goes and I will cover the 9 fights that are left over, 4 on the prelim, 5 on the main card. So tune into that. We're out of here. Go out and be a champion, and we'll talk to you next week.